You'll need this worksheet for students to look at to know everything that they need to map. And then you'll need to get back to your map that we've been working on. And for this one, we've already done motivations for exploration and colonization. We've done the 13 colonies. And now we want to map the French and Indian War. So after you've discussed the growth of the 13 colonies and mercantilism and the business that's going on here, now we want to talk about how that's going to lead into some problems that relate back to what we talked about when we were exploring, that competition factor. So for the French and Indian War, the very first thing that it says that we need to do is add markers for the following countries, England and France. Now for this marker for England, I'm going to search for London, England, because I want it to be a little bit more exact. So once I search for it, I'm going to click Add to Map. I want to remove this extra stuff, and then I want to change the name from London to England. I also want to make my marker red, keep it red, but I'm going to keep the same style that I have been using. The reason why I want to put it in London is because this is where England's lawmakers are located, Parliament. And so Parliament is going to start having a little bit more to do with what's going on in the colonies at this time. Remember that England owns the colonies over here in America. All right, the next marker I want to add is one for France. I don't need to be exact, so I can just drop a marker there. Name it France and make it blue. All right. And I want you to think about, look at how close these markers are, right? And if we go back to thinking about these people who are exploring, right, we have England and France who are both exploring this new world here in America. And we know that England and France they have a history of fighting each other in various wars for the past 1,000 years. So they're extremely competitive in their ventures. They all want money. They want to make money. And land is worth a lot of money. And also, we found out what America has to offer. 13 colonies wise over here, we know that the fur trade was huge. And we know that the French were big fur trappers. And England wanted in on that too. And so for the French and Indian War, what we're going to start seeing is we have Native Americans who know the land and live here in America. And now we have the British who have settled here along the coast. And we have the French who have settled along into Canada and west of the Appalachian Mountains. And so each country is going to pair up with their own Native American friends, and they're going to start competing for control of the fur trade industry. And so what's going to happen is that's going to lead to war. So the first thing that we want to show on our map after we've done our markers is the land claimed by the British. So I'm going to use my draw line tool, and I'm going to map what land the British controlled. And we know that the British controlled the 13 colonies. So from Maine, which was part of Massachusetts, all the way down here to Georgia in the southern colonies, we want to map this land controlled by the British. And try to use as few clicks as possible. Remember, we're going to close our line by going from the crosshair to the pointer finger. And this says that we need to name it claimed by the British. Since it's claimed by the British, we want to save it and we want to make it a red shape, or excuse me, a red color. I don't want it to be too bold, so I'm going to up the border a little bit and turn down the transparency. So I'll save that. So if we look and we turn on our 13 colonies layer, that's about the same place that the 13 colonies were. Again, it doesn't have to be exact, but if we zoom in to see the modern day states, yes, that pretty much covers the correct area. All right. For the land controlled by the French, we are going to add another shape. Excuse me. And I know that the French controlled this big chunk of land up here in Canada. I'm just going to outline that real quick. Oop, a little too far, but that's okay. I'm going to keep coming down here all the way. We know they explored the Mississippi River, so I want to make sure that I include that area, especially in Louisiana right here. And then come up along the west side of the British, because they can't control the same land at the same time. Somebody technically controls it, so that's what they're going to be fighting over. So I get to my original click, and I'm going to name this Claimed by the French. And since France is always blue, we want to change that color to blue. And so right here, if we're looking at this, we have the British with control of 13 colonies, and the French in control of all this land to the west of them, west of the Appalachian Mountains that are in here, and on into Canada. The area kind of in between is where all of the fighting is going to happen. There's going to be some fighting up here in Canada, but the area that we want to focus on is right in here, and that's the Ohio River Valley. So I'm going to add another shape, and I'm basically going to just make kind of a circular area right here that goes by, that covers both areas claimed by each country. And right here I'm going to call this the Ohio River Valley. If you have your worksheet, here's some links that we can use to see what we're talking about. So here's the red area controlled by the British, here's the blue controlled by the French, and this area right in between that's striped is going to be the disputed area, and Ohio's right here. So let's look on our map and make sure that we got Ohio in our picture. Before we do that, we want to change this to like a gold color, not orange for Spain, but a gold area. And let's also make sure and call this the disputed area. So if we zoom in, sure enough, look at the bottom part of Ohio, the southern border of Ohio. It's not a straight line. It's squiggly like that because that is actually a river that flows out of these mountains here. And so this area was perfect for the fur trade industry. The river gave them shipping opportunities. And then this area was also where many natives lived. So that was huge for business. It's also pretty closely located to the middle colonies, which was very good for shipping. So this is a time where if your teacher wants to add descriptions to these or add pictures, if you have time, you can do that. I'm going to search for Ohio River fur trading and see if something comes up. Here's some exploration pictures. I'll just leave that alone and see what you can find later. All right, so I'll zoom back out. And now at the bottom of your instructions, the next thing that says is we need to add a bold red line that represents the Proclamation of 1763. So as far as history goes, the French and Indian War plays out. The French end up losing, which if you look at this map, how in the world did the French lose when they have control of all this land and here's the British? So you'll talk about that more in class. But the British end up winning, and this French blue area is going to go away. The British are going to then control all of this area. And the king is going to pass a law called, or the parliament is, a proclamation of 1763. So I'm going to use my draw line tool to kind of represent this. So on the western border of the 13 colonies is the Appalachian Mountains. And through here, I'm just going to click a line through my, kind of following the same line as my red and blue area. And I'm going to end the line and I'm going to call it Proclamation of 1763. Our instructions tell us to give it this description. King George issued the proclamation, line of 1763, in order to keep colonists from settling west of the Appalachian Mountains. Many colonists ended up resenting the limits it imposed on westward expansion, especially from a king thousands of miles away. So for this line, we want to make it a bold red line because it's coming from England. And look at what the description says. Okay, so the king passed this law and tells the colonists in America, you cannot live on the other side of this line. You are not allowed to cross the Appalachian Mountains and settle there. And so on top of that, how is the king going to know if they're following those rules? Because the king is thousands of miles away, and he's telling them that they can't go over here. And so as far as westward expansion goes, if there's people over here who want to start a new life or make money, maybe in the fur trading industry, they're not allowed to do that. And I think you need to think of the point of view from the king and the point of view from the colonists. So take some time and think about that. What is the king's reasoning? And why are the colonists not liking that? So the very last thing that I want to map, is a line that shows you how far away the king is and how he's trying to control what the colonists are doing. So I told you that we were going to put our marker in London to show where Parliament was. So I'm going to take my line tool, click on my marker in London. I'm going to zoom back out. And I'm just going to click one time in London. And the only other time I want to click is here at the top of my proclamation line. And if I double click, it's going to end that line. We want to name it the King's Attempt to Control the Colonies. Since we're talking about the King of England, we want to make it a bold red line. And we want to give it a description like the one that's on your paper. So when the French and Indian War was over, it resulted in a large debt that the British Parliament or the British lawmakers decided that it would be repaid, or the debt would be paid, by taxing the American colonists. So by imposing higher taxes on the American colonies. Now remember, they are still technically the British colonies, so England does own them, but at this point, the colonists have been around for 150 years or so, a lot of them never even being born in England. So they're starting to kind of identify themselves as more American and maybe not so much British. Your description says that the British felt the colonists benefited the most from the war, and that they should help pay for it. Okay, so we're going to save our description. The last thing I added said that conditions arising from the French and Indian War help set the stage for the colonial revolt that's about to happen against the British, called the American Revolution. There is a picture that I want to add for his attempt to control the colonies, and I want to see if I can find it. Let's see if I can say King of England proclamation line and see what it comes up with. Or how about this? King controlling colonies. Okay, well, grab a picture of King George, and if you find a better one than I have, then feel free to use that. So I'll save that. And so I want you to think about what has happened. We have the British, we have the French. They fought a war over this area. When the British won the war, it cost them a whole lot of money. And so the king wanted to make sure that war didn't break out. All these French people that were over here, they weren't killed, or they didn't all of a sudden go back to France. They are going to have to live here together. So the king issues this proclamation line to try and keep the peace. But the king is, let's see, 3,000 miles away. So how is he going to do that? Well, he's going to end up sending some soldiers, and probably ones that are already here fighting the war. Once it's over, the king is going to let them stay, and he's going to want them to kind of police that line and make sure that colonists are following the rules and the laws. And so the more presents that the British give, and the fact that colonists are having to pay for this war and pay for these soldiers to babysit them, is not going to sit well with the English colonists. So what we'll see is that tensions are going to rise, and you're going to study a whole lot of events and other laws that are going to be passed that are going to anger the colonists and get them ready to go up against the most powerful country in the world, the British. So stay tuned for the American Revolution layer that will be coming up in